Hi, welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Talk Special Economic Zones. I'm your host, Ainsley Brown. In today's episode, we're going to talk about leveraging government procurement contracts as a investment attractor or non fiscal incentive investment attractor to be specific. Now, I like to do this every time, just for emphasis. Zones. What exactly are we talking about? Zones, there are different names: free zones, special economic zones, enterprise areas, foreign trade zones. It's all the same thing, basically. It's a specially designated area that has special rules associated with it and certain fiscal incentives that are given. A typical fiscal incentive that unifies them all, typical, not universal, close to universal actually, is duty free of items being brought into the zone, or duty waiver of items as long as those items remain in the zone. So raw materials, building materials, etc. Now, in terms of government procurement contracts, this is big business, even amongst small countries, small island developing states. This is big business, and this actually is an area that can be leveraged because of the size of it. Now, because of the national security implications and social implications, this is a very sensitive area that governments watch out for and control. The World Trade Organization rules even makes exemption, the regular, normal, free trade that we're used to. This is an area that is literally carved out, and there are so many different rules surrounding it that it looks like Swiss cheese when compared to regular trade, right? Because of the sensitivities around it. There's You can even do things like what they call domestic margin, where a certain percentage um, of the contracts, or a specific contract has to be assigned to a domestic partner or domestic companies, and that's fully lawful, fully compliant with WTO rules. Also, you can invoke emergency in emergency circumstances where the regular rules don't apply anymore because hurricane has come, or earthquake, or tornado, or whatever disaster has hit the country, and the government has declared a national emergency, and the regular rules that would allow foreigners to come in and are suspended, and dealt with. It's a very tricky area, a very sensitive area, but it's nevertheless an area that can be used or can be leveraged in business development, in attracting investors to a country, especially their special economic zone. So imagine for a second, and for the country to get several benefits from it. So inclusive of lowering the cost of the goods or services, and or well, not and creating jobs, and also having linkage, backward and forward linkages from the zone to the domestic territory, and from the domestic territory the to the zone, which then ought to then result into greater value chain integration, um, uh, greater productive capacities being expanded in the country, which then can then lead to other activities, and the country learning how to do new activities, and then even further expanded. So it's a virtuous cycle, or virtuous circle that builds upon it, on it, and the government procurement contracts can be a catalyst for that. Um, an area to explore when it comes to leveraging this is the domestic margin, because you can mandate that you must have a domestic partner, or a certain percentage of the contracts have to go to domestic partners, or domestic companies. That's companies not operating in the zone, for example, and are not of foreign origin. You can set up a situation where, in order to win this contract, Of course, you have to come to the country, set up a factory or set up a distribution center, and you must work with a local partner, right? Um, Now, this then sets up a situation where what if there are no local partners, or the partner is not of the sufficient quality? Now, this is where zone authorities and other and training institutions, everybody can come to the table and say, okay, so what do we need to do to get them to that standard, right? Come together, train, develop, improve your, in essence, improving the absorptive capacity of the country to absorb that investment and then multiply it, right? Which is what you want, which is typically one of the objectives of zones, right? You have those spillover effects, and those spillover effects cannot happen unless there's something to spill over into, right? And to have then that spillover effect multiply, you have to build the capabilities, right? The productive capacity of firms within the domestic space, right? So the procurement contracts can be used to leverage. Let's say, for example, pharmaceuticals. You don't have a pharmaceutical manufacturer in your country, but you have several distributors. They buy from overseas and they distribute, right? So now you have a massive set of contracts um, locally, right? Maybe you have some restrictions on overseas folks bidding, but they can collaborate with a local partner. So, um, particularly if there's somebody in the zone already that's local, you can then leverage that. Or you can say, well, I'll come and actually manufacture. You don't have to do the whole process necessarily, or I could repackage, right? I could repackage, um, because I want to be part of this contract, right? This contract is worth something to me. Uh, of course, this would not just be the only thing that a company would want to come to a country to do, particularly if it's a small space. If it's a bigger country now, and that might be sufficient enough of an attractor, but in many instances it won't be sufficient, but it's a sweetener. So you'd have to leverage the other non-fiscal incentives, as I spoke about in another episode about different types of incentives. Fiscal incentives being the tax breaks, financial incentives being cash that governments gives out, which is rarer form of incentive, and then there are non-fiscal or non-fiscal slash non-financial, um, whereby you're leveraging something, whether a natural endowment, a high mountain, a location proximate to a large market, or a choke point in global shipping, such as closeness to a canal, or closeness to some sort of waterway, um, things like that, proximity to large consumer markets who have a lot of disposable income to spend, for example. Uh, these are things that I'm talking about: the ability to train and the willingness to train, the processing of visa and work permit applications. Those are the types of things I'm talking about when I speak about non-fiscal incentives. Now, these procurement contracts, although they involve money, because the government will be spending that money, they're actually, in the context that we're speaking, are considered non-fiscal, but they can be used as a additional sweetener along with the other non-fiscal incentives and the fiscal incentives to solidify. But it's all about how do you connect those dots. Those dots are not going to naturally come together like that. It will take research, it will take thinking and analysis, and then actually going out and reaching out to people, and speaking as loudly as possible through the megaphone, letting people know that this exists, and also getting into the boardrooms and speaking to them and saying, hey, do you want to come and invest in my country? So if you like this episode, please like, share, subscribe. If you want to see me do a particular episode on a particular subject matter of interest to you, just leave me a message down below and I'll get right back to you. Bye for now.